There's always a lot of confusion about grub control in the lawn. Grubs in the lawn, of course, cause damage. You'll see areas that are yellowing out in the yard, and in their worst case, you can actually rake up the grass. It's no longer attached to the roots, and you'll just end up with bare ground after you rake the lawn. So the key to understanding grub control is understanding what you're dealing with. You are dealing with Japanese beetles. Grubs are Japanese beetle larvae. The Japanese beetles lay their eggs in the bright sunny areas of your lawn. They hatch out, and those are the grubs that you have. So the trick with understanding grub control is understanding their life cycle. And if you look at this chart here, you can see during the winter, the grubs that hatch in the fall, and they all hatch during August and September, they are dormant. They're down deep in the soil. They're way down below where you can do anything about them until about April and especially May, when the soil starts to warm up and they return to the root zone of the grass, and then they emerge as Japanese beetles sometime in June. They out there in the world eating your beans and your rose bushes and all of that. But then in July and late August, or excuse me, July into August and early September, they start laying their eggs, and those eggs hatch in August and into the month of September. So that's when they're the most vulnerable. Okay, so now let's pick up where we are here in spring. In spring, if you're going to treat for grubs and you just realized you have had the problem, you're going to use something like this, 24-hour grub control. This is a very strong chemical. You're going to put it on the lawn, water it in, and it's going to kill the grubs on contact, along with a lot of other insects. Basically, any insect that's in the lawn, this is going to kill. So you'll be able to kill grubs and ticks at the same time. But as far as grub control, this really isn't the way to go. This is emergency treatment in spring because you didn't realize that you were having the problem in the fall. So it's something you may use once in your life in spring and never again, because most of the damage that the grubs do occurs during September and October before they burrow down below the frost line to hibernate for the winter. So how do we properly treat for the grubs? Well, the first thing in the arsenal is this annual grub beater right here. This is a much weaker chemical. Doesn't really kill much other than the grubs. But the way that it works is you need to put it on in, say, mid to late July, water it in, goes down into the soil, and it's absorbed into the root system of the grass where it's held. And then when the grubs start hatching during August and early September, it's in their food, they eat a little bit of it, and because they're so tiny, they die very quickly without really causing any substantial damage to the lawn. So this really is a better approach than treating every spring, because in spring, basically it's like closing the barn door after the horses have already run off. Here you're killing them as they hatch, so you don't have a problem with grubs in the spring. But that is a chemical. Now, better yet, we have Milky Spore over here. Milky Spore is a disease that only affects Japanese beetle grubs. And you'll need to apply Milky Spore during the spring feeding period, during May and early June, before they emerge as Japanese beetle grubs. And they'll eat it, they catch the disease, and they die from it, and that spreads it throughout the soil. Then you'll apply it again in late August, early September, for the hatch period where the small ones will eat it. They'll die. You're going to apply this twice a year, during May and during early September, for 3 years. Once you've done it for 3 years, there's enough of this built up in the soil. The grubs hatch in the lawn, they catch the disease, and it's their dying bodies that reproduce the disease for the following season. So the test plots on this are well over 20 years old. Not only is this an organic solution to grub control, but it's the only permanent solution to lawn grubs, because it does reproduce itself every year, and you're not using a chemical on your lawn. Now, you've got to remember, with all three of these, watering it in is crucial. A lot of people will put these on the lawn and say, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow, so that'll be fine. That's not fine. These need an inch of water immediately after application. In the case of the chemicals laying out there on the surface of the soil, first of all, it's not a safe situation for you to have. And second of all, it's got to get down in the soil. It'll break down exposed to sunlight and oxygen on the surface of the soil. And if it ever does get watered in, there's really not enough left of it to do the job. In the case of Milky Spore, it's light sensitive, so it needs to get watered in right away to get it away from the sunlight. And in fact, you'll want to put this on late in the day, water it in with a full inch of water. So you want to make sure that you use an inch of water. How long does that take? Well, everybody has different sprinklers and different water pressures. So the only way to really know when you've put an inch of water on is to measure it. And you can just use a tuna fish can or a cat food tin, something with straight sides. Put this on, turn on the sprinkler, and when that thing has got an inch of water in it, you've watered in your grub control properly. And most people that use a grub control don't really understand this, and they don't water it in properly, and it really doesn't work. So remember, early spring, not the time to treat. Unless you've got a real problem, then you use emergency treatment. Annual grub beater in late July, early August, watered in heavily with an inch of water. That'll take care of everything for an entire year because you're killing the hatching grubs. Or Milky Spore, twice a year, spring, late summer, for 3 years. Then you're done worrying about grubs forever. Got to be the best way to go. For Hewitt's Garden Centers, this is Peter Bowden.